In this lecture, I'm going to talk about splitting a test into reusable fragments. Sort of like a subroutine. Fragments are callable from a schedule, not from a test. In RPT 851, they do have the ability to call a script fragment from another script, but I haven't tried it, so I'm not going to talk about it. Now, the reason for using a script fragment is that it's time-consuming to do a recording and turn it into a script that you can rerun. When you look at that Google homepage and how much dynamic substitutions there were and all the stuff you had to figure out and substitute, it would be nice to do that just once, because no matter how many paths you have going through Google, most of them are probably going to go through google.com homepage. So this is a way to avoid having to re-script the homepage or any other page. In RPT 8.3, they did add rules, and those rules makes re-scripting easier and makes using script fragments less important. But it's still useful to know how to split scripts and reuse fragments, so I'm going to discuss that. These days it's easier to re-script by applying rules if you have a full set of rules that work, so splitting a test is not as important. The way that scripts can share information is that you define globally available variables inside of a script. One fragment produces the variables and the other one consumes it. So I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so I will go to the workspace that I was using before, and this time around I will create a new test. New test from recording. HTTP test. I'm going to put it in the tests folder. I'm going to call it Google with Images, because I'm going to go to the images link. So the first part of this test will be the same. I'm going to go to the Google homepage, and the second part I'm going to click on the images link. Use Firefox again. Take all of the defaults on this page, and the browser will come up. And the first thing I need to do is clear the browser cache, because I want to start with a clear cache. And clears the browser cache. And as best practices say, I first put a comment, and then I'll name the page after I go there. So my comment is Google homepage. Copy that, and I'll use it later. Go to google.com, which is the same that I did in the other script, which is the point of this. So that way I can show you that I can reuse that fragment. Now before I record another link, another page, I want to make sure that these connections are closed, because keep alive connections are kept open. I want to make sure I do not use the same connection in the first fragment to the second fragment, because I want each mouse click to be its own new connection. But I am on that page, so let's name the page. So we'll give it a page name. And I can even put a comment in for the next page, which I haven't gone to yet. And let me see if the connections are closed yet. No, they're not. It takes about a minute for these to time out. And I will fast forward to the end of this, because you don't want to have to sit here for a minute and watch me do this. There, the connection just closed. Okay, now I'll go back and I'm going to click on the images link. So that's the second page I'm fetching in this test. First I went to the home page and then I went to the images. So now I'll name that page. And so there was 324 packets fetched for the entire test, and now I close the browser, which generates the test. And I'll open the test. And it tells me that there are some substitutions need to be done. Do you want any help? I'm going to say no. It's not a bad idea to say yes, but I said no. And there's my images link, my comment, and my page name. And you can see some substitutions were done. Let's apply rules. Since I have rules from the Google test, the first Google test, let's just apply the rules. I'm going to uncheck data transformation. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to clear existing correlations. I like what they did. I'm going to use the rules that I generated on the first Google page. And I'm going to generate some substitutions based on the rules. Now, if your rules are excellent, this will substitute for everything. You won't have anything else to do. But my rules are not that good, so I have more to do. I'm not sure how much substituting that actually did. It did a little. Okay, now I'm going to add some error checks. Response code verification points. And we'll add it to all the pages that were selected. Exact check. Now I'll highlight the images link page. First, let me show you that I created a local variable. The rules created that user agent local variable, and it no doubt substituted for the user agent. So that's one thing that the rules did do. So now I'm going to select that one page, that one link, and save it as it, well, it tells, I want to save it as a new fragment, but it tells me I need to save any changes that I made first. So I saved it, and now I'm splitting it, and I get to name this new fragment. I'm going to call it the images link. And you can put a description in here, which is not a bad idea. Usually I'll put a description of what build I was using when I recorded this test, or anything else that's relevant. It gets saved as a comment in a new fragment. And RPT will automatically make variables for you. It recognizes that the first page has some substitutions that are being passed to the second page. So it's creating these variables to be passed from the first fragment to the next. And it will turn them into global variables. So you change the visibility from this test only to all tests for this user. One thing I'll say is that you don't want, if you're getting information from a data pool, you probably want to uncheck this automatic change. No HTTP protocol changes required. When I saved it, it asked me if I wanted to open it, and it will open it. And there's the fragment. It's got the name that I called it. It's got variables created by split test, and it's got those 5 variables that were coming from the home page are now passed as variables to this, and they are visible in all tests for this user. And if they're not initialized, well, there's a runtime error if it's not initialized when it's first used. That's the right default, because if it's not initialized from the first page, then it's a problem. Same thing for all these other items. And RPT does its best to name the variables, but typically I will go and rename the variable container. And I'll also rename some of the variables just to make them more meaningful, because RPT does its best to come up with a name, but doesn't always, come up with a very descriptive name. So I will rename these variables to make them understandable to me. And when you rename a variable, if they're substituted here, they will automatically be changed. And you can see here that it's using the local variable for the substitution in the HL field. Same thing for tab 2. It's coming from the input. And there's the variables. And you have to be very careful if you rename the variables to make sure that the variables in the other script fragment are the same as here, exactly the same, because it's looking for a name match. So if you change a name of a variable here, you can change it in any other fragment that's going to pass that variable around. You can save these changes I just made as a rule. I'm not going to for simplicity's sake. And now I'm going to go and create a fragment out of the other segment, the Google homepage. I'm going to name the page. Call it homepage. Homepage only. Give it a nice description. And once again, it's telling me, do you want me to generate variables for you? And I say, yes, I do. It says, do you want to open the test editor? Yes, I do. And there is the homepage only. It's got some variables that were created automatically. And this is where, for the variables created by split test, I want to rename that container, and I want to rename any variables that I named in that other fragment. And you'll see, if I show you, that it's been changed to all tests to this user, so it knows to share those variables with other script fragments. And when it leaves, right before it leaves this code fragment, it sets those variables, right? And so that's how the variables are shared with the other tests. They're assigned. And if I change the names of the variables, the assignment statements, the set statements would also change. Now, how do you use script fragments? You use them in a schedule. So I'm going to create a new schedule. This is what you actually execute when you're running a load test. You execute a schedule, not a test. You can run individual tests for test purposes. You can't run script fragments for test purposes because they don't work by themselves in general. But you can run schedules, and it helps you come up with a number of stages. I'll go into that some other time. But this basically lets you generate an endless loop, infinite loops, because typically you want to execute these fragments over and over and over again until you're done running. So it created an infinite loop, but I need to put a test in there, but I don't want to insert, I want to add, because insert will put before the highlighted item. I will navigate to the test folder where those two fragments are. I will select the two that I want, or you can select one at a time and add them later. Go back and add another one later and move it around. Text selects the two fragments, and then it's going to execute the home page first, and the image is linked next, and it will loop ad infinitum until the test is done. And that is how you put two script fragments together inside of a schedule. So that showed that you can take a recording, split it into reusable parts, like a subroutine, and call those fragments from a schedule, and you can pass variables around from one fragment to another. And while I was at, I showed how to apply rules.